Looking for a life insurance company that specializes in what you actually need? Protection. Call Danny today with Symmetry Financial. Danny is certified in all 50 states, which means Symmetry Financial is not limited and has over 30 companies to choose from. Symmetry Financial has proved time and time again that their options and pricing is just better than the rest. Give Danny a call today at 828-994-1681 to see how Symmetry Financial can make life simple.
Unforgettables. Nice. This show is sponsored by Unforgettables. Unforgettables creates detailed hand-painted baseballs for every baseball fan. Check them out at unforgettables.com.
Right now on Baseball Talk with Trey Snide, I am Trey Snide. I am sitting with the head coach, Kyle Nelson, the platform Cornerstone Coaching Academy. Coach, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Trey. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. How are you? And we're going to spend about maybe a minute on this, okay? And you probably know where I'm going with this. How are you holding up? How's your family? How's your team? How is everybody holding up in your neck of the woods?
It is different than anything we've ever experienced, right? And I don't think that anyone has the right answer as to what to do. You know, I try to talk with my team on a couple times a week. I send out videos to them of me just giving them a message of hope, and they have not canceled our season yet. So in Illinois, we still are hanging on by a thread here, but it's a difficult time for everyone, for seniors, for coaches, for their families. It's unlike anything we've seen before, and hopefully never again.
Absolutely. And one of your podcasts I was listening to, how to cope with this pandemic that we're going through, and it's called the Cornerstone Coaching Academy is the podcast. You can find that I found it on iTunes podcast, and I guarantee it's probably on other platforms as well. You actually were going to practice that day that they canceled for a long period of time. What was kind of the conversation that you had with your kids during that time?
It was really unique because we were in practice on Wednesday. And, I was wearing my watch and I was getting some updates as we were going through practice, and it was like NCAA is canceling the Big Ten tournament is canceled. And then it's like SEC tournament is canceled. And me and our assistant coach kind of knew what was going on. Our players really didn't know. And I don't think they quite grasped the gravity of the situation at that point. And then after, at the end of practice at our post-practice huddle, I kind of gave the message that we don't know when our last day for this could be, right? Like we could be shut down tomorrow. We could never get shut down. We could get to play our entire season, but it's not unlike, any individual player, right? Like you could be pitching in a game in April as a senior, blow your UCL or tear an ACL, and you're done for the year. So the message was really just to try to appreciate every single practice and every single game that you get to play. And I think that once we come out the other side of this, I think coaches and players are going to have a little bit more perspective on, number one, what high school sports really is, and number two, the privilege it is to be able to get with your team and just do something simple like have a practice. I guarantee our guys would love to get together and go through any type of practice as a team right now. And so that was really the message. And it was just kind of a unique situation because we kind of knew what was happening. The players were a little bit in the dark. And then that night, when Rudy Gobert tested positive for the virus, that was kind of the eye-opening moment where it was like, hey, this is getting real. And I think we're, probably not going to be back together as a team. And we have not been back together as a team since that Wednesday.
Wow. And that's such a heartbreak when it comes to that kind of thing, especially for possibly the seniors. We had two locally and on my team. We were a very young team program, but I feel bad for those guys. That day, March 13th, the day that they officially canceled here in North Carolina. That was our first home game of the season. We
Oh my gosh.
got a brand new field that we just built, redid, and
Oh my gosh, yeah.
it's one of those things where I felt so bad for them, the senior wise. But moving forward, you mentioned back down in Illinois that the season is not canceled. Again, you mentioned a little bit having a few conversations, sending videos like that, and that's where I kind of want to go into now with your podcast that I've come to love, which is called Cornerstone Coaching Academy. Let's kind of dive deep into that, Coach, and talk a little bit, or how did you kind of come together and say, you know what, let's kind of bring this to attention to coaches all across the country. And we're going to get into a couple different segments here on this show, Baseball Talk. And I am with our head coach, Kyle Nesson, as well as the Cornerstone Coaching Academy. How did you form and realize, you know what, let's kind of bring attention coaches all across the country?
Well, if you're kind of referring to how I got started with the podcast and that sort of thing. So actually, the roots of it, I coached a summer down in Myrtle Beach in a collegiate summer league. And down there I had some extra free time during the day because I wasn't working during the day. Most of our games were at night. And so I started a blog where I just kind of was writing down my ideas and writing down that kind of thing. And one of the areas that I've noticed over the years that has been of particular need to me is we have a ton of people who are out there volunteering their time and working with our young players, trying to get them better, spending tons of time, with youth leagues and with travel teams and high school coaches who are volunteering or getting very, very little money in return for the time that they're spending. And one of the things that I wanted to do to help out was to kind of give a voice to how difficult coaching baseball can be in a team setting. And that's really the goal of it, is to take a lot of the great ideas that we see out there on the internet, on Twitter. There's people doing amazing things with baseball right now. It's just difficult to put that into a team setting because you go from a one-on-one setting with an individual instructor or a small group setting with an individual instructor. And then all of a sudden, I get to practice and I've got myself and a pitching coach and 25 players. And so to me, the real goal of it is getting information in the hands of coaches so that they feel empowered when they walk into practice, that they have a plan, that it's a plan that's going to be player development centered. And then they know how to navigate around a lot of the shortcomings that they have because of a lot of the constraints they have with budget, with time, with space, and with their coach to player ratio. It's a lot unlike any other sport because it's really hard to simulate in practice. In basketball, you can go play 5-on-5 and you've simulated the game. If you scrimmage for 2.5 hours in baseball, you might have a kid who showed up for 2.5 hours, got one fly ball and 2 at-bats, and that was his entire day. So you really have to be more creative in baseball to get game-like reps in practice, and that's really where that's what my main goal is with the podcast and the website, is to get that information in the hands of as many coaches at as many different levels as possible.
Again, this podcast, Cornerstone Coaching Academy, led by Kyle Nelson. Coach, 10 years experience. Back in 2012, you decided to put this together. High school, clubs, collegiate level. So thank you for joining me this morning, my friend. Again, Kyle Nelson, the Cornerstone Coaching Academy. Now, what can I go into a little bit deeper into the coaching scene now, if we can, Coach? Let's kind of put a game plan together for beginning coaches. Like, for example, I've been football coach, basketball coach, baseball coach, but I want to kind of bring a light to kind of how do coaches, beginning coaches, should you say, succeed? And really, when there's coaches all across the country, how can a beginning coach kind of get their feet wet, and how can they succeed in this industry that we love so much?
I think, to me, the beginning thing, one of the first things that a young coach should do is they should find a mentor or a couple of mentors to help them out along the way that they trust, that they believe in. You'd be amazed, like if you contact someone maybe that you don't even know on the internet, a lot of times they'll get back to you. And so just reaching out to people and then finding those one or two people in your life. Maybe it's a former coach. Maybe it's a coach in your area. The thing that sinks in with me that I'll never forget, is I became a head coach at a really young age. I was 23 years old when I got my first head coaching job. That was at a really small school. Then I moved to the school I'm currently at, and I was an assistant for 1 year. And the year after being an assistant, I was the head coach the next year. So I'm 25 years old, taking over a little bit of a bigger program. And I reached out to a team that we had played that summer, and their coach, his name is Jeff Aldridge. He's now the athletic director at Crystal Lake Central High School. And I reached out to him and I said, Jeff, I appreciate the way things I saw when we played your team. Would you mind having a short conversation with me? I just got the head job. Would you mind having a short conversation with me? And we can kind of sit down and talk and see if I can get some ideas from you. And he invited me into to their school. Again, this is a school that's now in our conference.
Wow.
And he invited me into their school and set me down, and we talked for about 3.5 hours. And when I left there, I had a much better idea of what I wanted to do. And so, and then as I've gone through the years, I've got, 5 or 6 other coaches that I can look towards when I have a difficult situation. And I can just bounce ideas off of them or go get advice from them. And I think that is the biggest thing that I would recommend, because not only are you learning, but you're also building your network when you do something like that, right? So if you're like, let's say you're a young coach who's getting a volunteer position or an assistant coach position, and you reach out to other coaches around your area, when jobs come open, they're going to say, hey, this person is someone who's, interested in learning. They have a growth mindset, and they could be good for this job. Or I have this assistant job, or, like we have, say, they become an AD and then they're like, hey, we have a head job. I remember this guy 5 years ago reached out to me, had a growth mindset. Let's give him an interview. So not only are you building your knowledge base, but you're also building your network when you start to reach out to people and have, start to build that series of mentors like that.
Wow. I absolutely love it. Again, Cornerstone Coaching Academy podcast led by Coach Kyle Nelson right here on the Baseball Talk. I am Trey Snide. It's satisfying to hear you say that because, again, like you just mentioned before, reaching out to somebody that you listen to their podcast, you read what they do on their blog and their website, but you reach out to them for advice. And just like what I did with you here just this past Monday, I say, Coach, hey, would you mind? I have a podcast. Would you mind calling in? And I would love to interview. And seconds after I sent that, you sent me an email back saying, absolutely, Coach. And I can't thank you enough for that. And so that kind of explains what you just mentioned before about, I'm a young coach. I'm 32 years old now, got a young program, but leaning on guys and coaches and mentors that have been doing it for years, not calling you old coach. I'm not doing that. But leaning on somebody like that kind to put a game plan together, I think it's fascinating. And that's where our next discussion, Coach, kind of ideas on creating a successful offseason for high school sports. Especially, we're about to have the longest offseason we probably ever had in the history of baseball in our eyes here this year alone. Fortunately, here in North Carolina, in the Independent School Athletic Association, we believe ours will be canceled because our last game of the season is April 14th. And it's an out-of-conference. Independent school here locally starts about 2 to 3 weeks before the public school. So we believe our season will be over. That means our players, our young guys, won't get the kind of experience that you would hope they would. Guys that are extremely talented, they just need more time. Now, what kind of ideas can you put together to have an successful offseason for high school sports?
So a lot of it depends on what your state setup is. So I'll go through a couple of different setups. Like our state setup is really restrictive in the off season. The one thing that we have that's nice that a lot of other states don't have is we have access to our players during the summertime. I know some states don't allow that, or it's more like Legion ball, travel ball based. We do have a lot of travel ball programs here, but also we do get access to our players during the summertime. But then we lose that access once we get back to school until literally either the last week of February or first week of March. And so the only thing we can do from the time we get back to school is we can do strength and conditioning in that period. And then they're kind of on their own to go find, baseball instruction, which absolutely drives me crazy because they have to go spend money on things that I would provide for them, for free in small groups, right? But what we do because of the situation that we're in,